I've got to admit to you, before I started exploring this set, I didn't know a ton about Final Fantasy. I started learning a lot of the stories once it was announced as a Magic the Gathering set. I even played the first few hours of Final Fantasy VII to get some experience with that one. While I was exploring the set, I was noticing highly played commander cards that had been reprinted in a Final Fantasy treatment, and what I assumed was an iconic moment from the series that I just had no idea about. Recently, I spoke with a Final Fantasy expert, Pez.
Hey everybody, my name's Pez. I make Final Fantasy content every night of the week.
I want to take these iconic moments to Pez and see if I can get to the bottom of what's going on these cards. Joel R. Magic is brought to you by Card Conduit, the best place to sell your cards quickly and easily on the internet. TCG Player, the best place to buy them. Dragon Shield, the best way to protect them. And Moxfield, the best way to put your deck lists on the internet.
This character is actually, this is a larger character in the lore of this game than the actual game gives it credit for. So the main character, or one of the main characters, Terra, this is her actual father. And he essentially has this ability, but he comes in and essentially does this wave attack. But there's also a moment, which I thought that this artwork was actually capturing, is when he actually sacrifices himself, puts himself into Magicite, which is what players would then use to resummon them later. This is kind of like ultimately tied to his ability. It's more of like I believe it's a non-elemental attack.
So while we're on the subject of removal, I've got Ruinous Ultimatum here, removal spell. This is destroying all non-land permanents your opponents control. Literally everything on the battlefield, except for the land, will be gone. We've got Kefka in the art, but I'm assuming there's much more represented on this card than just, oh look, it's the main bad guy.
Kefka is such a unique character with not much backstory, but he's practically Final Fantasy's Joker, but with a little more insanity. This is nearly like I said, I don't know much about Magic the Gathering, but just by looking how much like red, white, and black there is, this card nearly just is his motivation. And this is like an incredibly famous line from him as well too. So, and I can't remember if this is near the start or the end, but his motivations never change. He wields quite a lot of power, even though he doesn't seem like it.
When I pitched this video to you, you actually brought this one up. You had already seen it. You said, we got to talk about this one. Tell me about Knight's Whisper.
The lore around it nearly needs to go back to Kefka, because the character in here, Cyan, he is essentially like the retainer, the head general of the city of Doma, and he has a wife and child. And while they're fighting against the Empire for like dominance in that territory, Kefka does something that's absolutely incredible. Like, it's horrifying, but it's just like, in the terms of storytelling, especially in a game that came out in 1994. And actually, when Magic the Gathering first announced this Final Fantasy collaboration, there was this artwork that came out with like Kefka holding his head, tipping something into water. Well, what that was him poisoning their water supply, essentially killing everybody in the castle. Men, women, children, everybody died. And amongst that was Kyan's wife and child, and he was one of the survivors. But you actually see, and it's quite sad, he runs into his bedroom and he sees his wife and child in bed dead, and he removes the blankets, and then you see their lifeless bodies fall down. And you're like, and then he runs out in a rage, which turns into like this really emotional battle. Halfway through the game, when you're kind of regathering the party, which we'll talk about in a card later, you return to this castle and he sees his wife and child. And I remember playing it as a kid, and it was like really traumatic. I was like, this is wild. But then years have gone past. I now have 2 children. I see this and it hit me really hard, not even like a year ago. And there's so much emotion that was just within a video game that never existed back then. When Mario was like trying to save Peach, Sonic was trying to save, like creatures from Dr. Robotnik in the like little furry creatures. Final Fantasy VI was telling stories about loss, dealing with loss. Like, you lose in Final Fantasy VI. That story is about you lost, so you have to pick up the pieces.
Right.
Mass murder, suicide, teen pregnancy. These are themes in this game that not a lot of people know about. Once you beat this game, it feels like everybody's stories come to a complete circle. And his is one of the most tragic. And I think the artwork alone in this is it is stunning. But from the ability of the card, they've nailed it. This is a perfect card in my opinion.
I would have never thought twice about it, which was kind of the point of having this conversation with you. There's this card called Toxic Deluge. and they've reskinned it as a card called Merciless Poisoning. But I feel like when you were describing that, I went, oh, well, I saw the art of that happening today. Kefka poisoning all the water.
For a pixel game, I know it's a lot hard for people that don't have the nostalgia glasses for it. In my opinion, not just as a Final Fantasy fan, just a person that enjoys media in general, this moment just captured what just seems like such a simple moment, was like redefining, honestly, for storytelling.
So I want to talk about Rise of the Dark Realms. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. This is 9 mana. There's not many 9 mana spells in Magic, I'll put it that way. Epic looking art piece here.
This is the final moment before the final battle. But this is the moment where you're standing, you've risen to, Kefka essentially becomes a god. Mm-hmm. He destroys the shift of power in the world and essentially puts himself in the center of it. And he has this ability called Holy Judgment, which in other Final Fantasies, that ability is tied to the holy, it's a holy based attack, which is tied to Alexandra, which is like Final Fantasy 9, 7, 8. And he lifts himself up. He lifts a large landmass, which used to be the Empire, into the sky. And from there, he uses Holy Judgment to essentially destroy towns. So nobody's safe. Even if you kind of like secure somewhere, you know that Kefka is going to just drop a bolt of light on you. The party fight their way up, make their way up into the sky, and they're essentially at the pinnacle of it. And then Kefka's just there, not looking like a god, just looking like himself like a clown, and he's standing on this like cliffside. And you as a party then essentially surround him on this cliffside and then start having this conversation. And one of like the final lines Terra says is, you can't destroy everything. People will always have dreams. And that's where Kefka's like, I don't care. We're going to die anyway. Why can't I be the one to kill you? That's his whole motivation. And this is where essentially it goes into what is the song then Dancing Mad plays, which is one of the most famous Final Fantasy VI songs apart from Terra's theme. And it's such a really cool scene. And if just looking at this artwork and then having Dancing Mad playing in the background, they've absolutely captivated. I can't get over how big Mog's head is though. Like I've never actually seen Mog standing beside everybody.
Yeah, the scale of that creature was something that caught me off guard too. I had just always assumed they were very, very small, like Pikachu size or something. Like, that thing being a good 3 feet tall is quite interesting.
And he's also a side character. Like you don't have to get him. Even everyone you meet in the first half of the game is canon. Like you find them. With him, you can just never have him join the party at all.
I was really just in love with all of these characters standing here aura farming before they do whatever they do, or they were, rising from wherever they were rising. As I pitched this video to you, Pez, you said, yes, but there's one card in particular I want to talk about, and that's Rejoin the Fight.
So at the end of, as you can see, we got Celeste, Terra in the center, and then Sabin, Sabin's my favorite character. But this moment here is after the world goes to ruin. So Kefka goes to power, world gets split apart, the world gets actually ripped apart, and then all ancient demons start like coming, resurfacing, dragons appear. So Terra then starts to take a bit of a backseat role, and which I'm a bit bummed about because she was kind of like the main focus leading up to the halfway of the game. Terra then finds herself split from the party, and she's in this small village, and she's the only adult, and she's like a young adult as well. She's like I think Terra might be in her late teens or early 20s, but she's essentially holding off this ancient demon called Humbaba from like ripping the town apart and essentially eating all the children. So she's been living this life, could be weeks, months, where she's defending these kids. And then eventually the party, like Sabin and Celeste, find each other and they make their way around to find Terra. And Terra is pretty much at the point where she's only got a few fights left in her and she's going to die. But once she finds out that 2 of the young teenagers, they find out they're pregnant. So Terra's all of a sudden, oh my God, like things are getting real right now. And when she finds that out, she then turns back into her Esper form. What they've captured is like, even though it's a small moment in the game, it's like one of her like last defining moments in the game, like finding purpose after being a slave for so long, essentially being a ruthless killer for the military. Now she's protecting, and she goes in this rage. And I think it captures something that the pixel games could.
Whose hand is that in the top left?
That's Humbaba. So he's like this giant green frog turtle looking monster, like with a big dad bod.
Who is the character on the right in this art?
So that's Sabin.
Yep.
He's most famously known, if there's a meme that comes out of this game, it's for him suplexing a train. So, which I'm hoping is a card.
You mentioned Sabin as your favorite character, so I just want to pivot real quick and talk about Sabin's card and see what you think of it. A red and 4 for a 4/3 This is a human noble monk, and it's got double strike. Sabin goes further to have this ability called Blitz, which is 4, and then you discard a card, which will let you cast it for a little bit cheaper, and it's going to get haste so that it can immediately attack.
So the reason why I like Sabin, not only as a character, but also as mechanically wise in battle, he's a little broken, where traditionally in Final Fantasy, you have like AP points or MP points. Sabin is just, you want to do an ability, just hit these buttons, essentially like a tiny quick time event, and he'll do it. And there's no repercussions of like, can only do it so many times during a battle. So Sabin can like do like high damage singular attacks, high damage group attacks. And as a character, his thing is like, he's a monk that he's the twin brother of the king of Berigio. I believe that, I don't think I've ever said the name of their town out loud. Edgar. So he's a twin brother to Edgar, and Edgar's like kind of the opposite. He's a ladies' man, ruler of the kingdom. Yeah, master machinist. So where Sabin doesn't use any like MP to do his abilities, which is all like, you know, he's the monk.
Yeah.
Where Edgar, he is essentially like an endless. He's like Inspector Gadget. He'll have crossbows, chainsaws. One's the like, I'm the party animal. I'm the other one's like I'm the like honest, self-controlled guy, but also I like to fight.
Yeah, Edgar can cast artifacts from your graveyard, so that makes sense. He's just constantly making use of things, even if they're broken. He's just pulling tricks and toys out of anywhere. And he gets more power when he attacks, and there's a large artifact on the battlefield with you, basically. So one more I wanted to show you, and it was the flavor text that really drew me to want to know more about this card from you. This is Bedevil. You're able to destroy either an artifact, a creature, or a planeswalker. And the flavor text here, on that day, the world was changed forever. What is going on in this Bedevil art?
So this is the reason when people want Final Fantasy VI Remake, a lot of people want it to see this in 4K. So when I say Final Fantasy VI isn't about let's beat the bad guy, Final Fantasy VI, you learn is you lose. I'm a spoiler for a lot of people that haven't played the game from 1994, but you lose. And this moment here is you trying to escape the fact that you bug it up. What happens is essentially the world gets ripped into, not like two floating parts in space, the world gets ripped apart. So much so the land masses change. It's like 2012. Everything rips apart because Kefka just uses the power of the warring triads, which is essentially like the divine power, the Triforce, the ultimate source of energy. It's where Espers get their abilities from, where magic originally comes from. Kefka's standing in the heart of it and hits the world. Hits the world out, which is this card right here. I was about to like bring that up.
The warring triad, it's a god artifact creature. It lets you mill, so you lose a little bit of your knowledge, or you lose a little bit of your mind maybe, but you can add mana of any color to help you cast things. And then it's not actually a creature until you've got 8 or more cards in your graveyard.
I might just extend on this because I think they've actually done something really well here. So Kefka, once he stands in the center of the warring triad, Kefka as a character doesn't have much backstory, but what we do know about Kefka was he was a high-ranking general in the military, and he was the first ever soldier that pretty much was subjected to experiments to give him the abilities to use magic. And it made him insanely powerful, but it also sent him insane. That's why he's dressed like a clown. That's why he hops around like a rabbit. That's when you explain, like, you kind of lose, like with this card, you lose a bit of like sense or knowledge. It feels like this was purposely meant for Kefka to like step in the center of. And once the world rips apart, you don't really know lore-wise how many people died, but it's implied like a large chunk of the world's population die. And I guess that kind of sense when people go to the graveyard, because then when you go and confront Kefka, you have to fight through the warring triad, and then they go from statues to being real. So there's so many layers here where I feel like the abilities of this card actually did the lore justice. I think this is done really well.
They had talked about how much care they put into the design, and that was obvious just from how well the set's been received, but there are levels here that I had no idea of understanding.
The moment that this card is exactly showing, you see in the pixel art where the ship breaks apart because they're in an airship at the moment trying to fly away. The ship rips in two, and you see Locke diving for Celeste. So at the moment, you've just defeated like the cutscene that happened where like the warring Kefka's moved the warring triads out of their triangle, which is like disturbed the balance of like the balance of the world. So there's now powers like I guess like energy shooting off and like hitting the ground. And while it looks like you're just like a little bit of a sparkle hitting the ground, it hits the ground and it starts to shift the landscape. So as you can see here, so trying to imagine this in 4K, like in a game that came out on like PS5 or on a like on a 5080. You can only imagine. This is why I want this game remade so bad. So you've got like military and returners, which are like the rebels, like essentially now just trying to escape, and they're getting crushed. There's women, children. There was a frog. I can't remember what they're called, but that frog died. And this is the moment. I believe it's this exact moment right here. And you see Locke dive for her, and she falls back. And that's that.
That's that exact moment of this.
That's that exact moment. And they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it.
Specifically, the Final Fantasy VI cards must really be doing it for the community right now to see some of these moments in just like beautiful art.
I'm a big fan of video game preservation, and like a lot of people attack Square Enix for what they do, like with the changing of the way video games are. But one thing they do best than anyone is like really show love to their previous games, the games that like found like made them, and collaborations like this and moments like this means so much to me, and I can only imagine what it means to so many other people.
That's awesome. I love that. Let's jump over to Final Fantasy VII and see if any of these are hitting for you. This is a card called Austere Command. You can either destroy all artifacts, all enchantments, all small creatures, or all big creatures.
I'm actually amazed that they use, because this is like a big moment from different sort of angles. What happens here at the start of disc 1, which is still like when you're inside the Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII.
Now, hang on. We're gamer boomers, y'all. They used to put games on discs, and sometimes you would need multiple discs because a game was too big.
So I don't have any here. I've got like I got Lost Odyssey here. This is on 4 discs, I believe. But on disc 1 on Final Fantasy VII, there's a moment where you play like you're in the eco-terrorist group Avalanche, and they figured out where you're located. So what this moment here is actually captivating is there is essentially an act of terrorism being created by the government. Well, I said the Shinra Power Company, because they control the city, they run the city. They're an arms manufacturer that essentially rose to power by selling weapons to everyone. Then they kept the good weapons for themselves, and then essentially became the rulers of the world. What they wanted to do was destroy a part of their whole city, killing everybody, to kill a small group, which is your party. And this moment here is the discussion between the president, who's sitting down, Heidegger, who's the head of the military or the soldiers, and then Reeve, who's head of urban development. But Reeve, spoiler, is actually Keishi or Cat Sif, depending how you say it. He's the who controls like the large robotic MOG unit and the cat. And they're saying, okay, well, we're going to drop this sector of Midgar. And if you don't know what Midgar is, it's essentially like, they call it like a giant pizza that's lifted in the sky, like supported by certain pillars. And they want to drop a slice of it, Sector 7, to kill everybody in Sector 7 slums, i.e. killing the party members. And this is that discussion where they're like, haha, we're going to do it, deal with it. And Reeve's like, what have we just agreed to do? And that's that moment right there. Destroying everything is perfect. There's like that card looks like it's OP. I don't know, but it looks powerful.
And Decimate is from that same deck. I'm wondering if this is maybe the fallout of the conversation that we saw happen in Austere Command.
What you're seeing, like first glance, it looks like there's just like been a fire or like a bomb that's gone off. But what you're actually looking at is the buildings that were originally in the air. That's all of them falling, and beneath everything under there is another, like essentially the slums. So there's a lot of death here. And there's a moment in Final Fantasy VII Remake when you're climbing up. Imagine if you're standing roughly where that green building is, looking back down at it, and there's the sun's rising or setting, and it's just like, it's beautiful in the most horrific way possible. And that's in the remake. And if you play it in the original, this like little small moment where you kind of see in the background like this, like, can see the destruction.
Yeah,
but it's a very, very powerful moment.
President Shinra's line there in the flavor text: progress requires sacrifice, learn to live with it. That's a famous line from the game.
That line was also in that scene where like he's kneeling down like, what have we done?
I want to talk about Secret Rendezvous. This is a card that a lot of people have been excited about because they printed 4 different arts of it. Can you give us context for what's going on here if we don't know?
There's a secret mechanic in Final Fantasy VII that's like a friendship mechanic where like everybody gets points. So it depends on what you say. There's a moment where you get a flower at the start of you can buy a flower off Aerith, and each decision adds a point, and eventually whoever has the most points near the end of, I would say probably near the like 90% section of disc 1, you go to the gold saucer and you're in your hotel room, and eventually the door knocks and then a party member will come in, and depending on who your highest friendship score is the party member that walks in. So yeah, I want to get the whole set of these and frame them. I think it's awesome.
There's one card in here that has Cloud wielding a baseball bat with nails stuck into it.
So this is the famous nail bat. So I believe in the original game of the Temple of the Ancients, and it's just a basic weapon, and they brought it back in Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I believe when you're in the slums, you come across like a bunch of children who have formed their own little neighborhood watch.
It's kind of blowing my mind the amount of little Easter eggs and call-outs that they have made across all the games here. I want to jump to Final Fantasy X. An offer you can't refuse is one of the more powerful and more famous counterspells of recent designs. Tidus's flavor text here in the line here is, "All right, I'll work."
This is so Riku's one of the main party members, but this is your first introduction to her. Before this scene, Tidus just goes through the introductory of the game where his city gets destroyed. At the start of Final Fantasy VII, Zanarkand, everything gets lifted up, kind of like unnaturally. And he goes into what a lot of people joke into a butthole, because it looks like he's going into a butthole. Yeah. And then he gets stretched out, game goes white. He starts having these like hazy scenes, and then he appears surrounded by water in front of this destroyed temple. He makes his way to the temple. He's on his own. He's trying to like find warmth. He's trying to find food. Then all of a sudden this monster attacks, and he's trying to fight the monster. He's a blitzball player. He's not a fighter. He doesn't really know how to fight. So he's like struggling to hold his own. But then suddenly this wall explodes, and these what looks like kind of like scavengers and raiders kind of bust through the wall, and she walks up and helps you defeat him. She gut punches him, drops him down, and he's like, okay, I'll whatever, I'll work for you.
You were talking about getting pulled up into a big butthole. I'm assuming that's what's going on in this Path to Exile, where I was like, what is going on with Tidus in this one?
So this is where he's getting pulled into a butthole. So this is at the end of the tutorial.
Yeah.
So at the start of the game, this being called Sin, you don't know, it's just this giant floating orb in the sky of water, and you're being guided by what seems to be a friend or a companion, someone you know, called Auron. Well, it feels like he's trying to save you. You're fighting through this wave of monsters that this thing's creating, but Auron then leads you directly to the center of it. And then Auron holds you up and says, oh, it's funny, it's literally says it on the card. He holds it up and he looks at the butthole. This is your story, it all begins here. And then Auron gets like pulled into it, and so does Tidus, but then everyone's separated. And like, I've never been personally pulled into a butthole, but I can't if imagine this could be what it's like. So
I want to look at the card 3 Visit. What have we got going on here?
So this is in a location called the Muckalania Woods. It's a forest that's been frozen. And it's also quite close to the Muckalania Temple, which is where Shiva is located, the ice summon. First time you arrive, Auron says, hey, we need to take a detour. I need to show you something. Then he starts carving his way through the woods. And then you arrive at this tree. Now, this tree like kind of appears twice, but I think it's just reused assets. And the reason why I think it's incorrect is because they're clearly standing on the water, and then you fight this giant orb. Once you defeat it, a sphere drops out, and spheres in this game are quite recurring. They're used for multiple things, and some of them are like a recording device. And there's a recording device from Tidus's father, and this is where Tidus learns a little bit more about his father, who he was. This is where you learn that the pilgrimage is supposed to end in the result of Yuna sacrificing herself, and it is a very powerful moment. But there is a card called Yuna's Decision that this line probably would have worked well with.
Yuna's Decision is choose one sorcery. I'm seeing choose one, continue the pilgrimage, or choose one, find another way. that has a lot of narrative weight behind it.
That text would have been more better there.
Yeah.
Because Oren's not present for this conversation. And you can see the trees very similar. Continue the pilgrimage is doing it, but there's also this second objective, find another way. How do we do this without sacrificing Yuna?
Sort of the penultimate card from Final Fantasy X here. A lot of people were joking or laughing or just thinking this was so perfect when it got spoiled, and I want to know what's going on with the two main characters laughing in this art.
And Yuna's also got like a lot going on, and she's quite stressed about everything. So there's the weight of the world kind of like weighing her down. And Tidus earlier was telling her sometimes, it's good to laugh. Sometimes it's kind of like just to scream. And Yuna walks up to him and says, hey, like, you feeling okay? And he's like, oh, not really. Do you want to scream? Oh, I don't think that's going to help this time. And then she said, okay, you're going to laugh. He's like, what do you mean? You're just going to laugh. You're going to let it all out. And then he sits there and he does the most famous, ha, 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 ha. And it's really cringe. And there's like, a lot of people say it's so dumb. It's so like, it's bad acting. But it was meant to be that way. And James Arnold Taylor, the voice actor for Tidus, purposely did it that way because he did something really unique, is that when he recorded Final Fantasy X, he didn't read the whole script. He didn't read the story. He didn't know how it was going. So he wanted to do the story and try to like learn about it. So there was real emotion behind his voice acting. And the reason why he did the ha 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 that way was to like force a fake laugh, because it is a fake laugh. You've just found out your father is killing everybody as a result of the death of a lot of people's parents. The reason why Waka's brother and Lulu's husband or fiance was dead, and people are marching off constantly to kill themselves, is because of your father. There's more to it, but you'll know if you know the game. Then Yuna's like, this is kind of like cringe, stop. But then Tidus is like, nah, whatever. And then he gets into it, and then she joins in. And then all the Guardians are surrounding him like, you guys are going insane. And it's like this moment where for a second they forget that the world's falling apart.
Yeah.
And it's just captivated in this like moment that's transcended the game. Like Final Fantasy, Sephiroth transcends Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
Moogles, Cactars, but this moment is the thing that transcends this game. And this is what pushes it into like more of a mainstream sense. And they've captured all that in a card.
Well, then let's pivot from this moment to something that is starkly different, and I think is probably the other pivotal moment that transcends this game. They chose the card Farewell to represent what I am worried you're going to tell me is a very sad moment.
They defeat Sin. Sin's destroyed. They defeat the reason why Sin exists. And Tidus exists because of that same motivation drive that kept Sin around and the Aeons. But Tidus is also there because of that reason. Tidus was never from 1,000 years in the past. He was actually the memories of those that died from Sin's attack when he originally attacked. And all those everybody that turned themselves into like a faith to essentially give this being called Yu Yevon the power to summon Sin, also summoned the memories of Zanarkand, the main city at the start of the game, and all the people that lived in it.
Yeah.
So, and that was a different city. So the start of the game is not the actual attack. And Tidus was one of the people that lived there, and he was pulled from that city and exists through the game. That's who you're playing. And because that power is destroyed, Tidus fades along with everybody. And this is that moment where they have their final goodbye.
Yuna doesn't end up sacrificing herself, but Tidus has to pay the ultimate price for defeating Sin. Is that basically what ends up happening?
That's pretty much it. You go from being her guardian to learning the truth to then, oh, wait, I'm the one that's going to die at the end of this. And Yuna kind of learns what's going to happen. Someone says something and she's like, wait, what do you mean? And when it's happening, she's like, no, you're not going. You can't. It's like it's over. I have to go.
If you've watched this far, thank you so much. Hitting that like and subscribe button is the quickest and easiest way to help me out and let me know that you want to see more content like this in the future. There's a part 1 to this discussion if you want to see me and Pez discuss the pre-con commanders and the character designs versus the card designs. And look out for the third and final part of our discussion where he is actually going to pick the cards and bring them to me, and he's going to explain some cool and iconic moments that he really loves that got represented in the card designs. Thank you so much. See you in the next one.